Of that, 11-year-old Alvaro Garza is alive and well. Producer Stephen Ray Almir has details on what some people are calling a miracle.
Well, if it was a miracle, we're seeing more of them these days. People who in years past would have been hauled off to the morgue are being saved. In fact, there is a growing knowledge of cold water rescue. They knew something about that in Fargo Moorhead. Kids playing by the Red River. One decides to venture onto thin ice. He falls through. Joey Garza sees his brothers slip below the frigid water.
He said in English to get him out to go call my mom because the ice was too cold.
Firefighters come quickly, first from Moorhead.
Well, when we arrived, we were confronted with just a hole in the ice and a gentleman down on the ice who told us that the boy had just gone under. He was trying to get out there to him. Immediately, we unfastened the boat and tried to get it down onto the ice as quick as we could. We knew we had bad ice, so we didn't even attempt any other type of rescue. We knew we had to get the boat.
Then we got in the boat. There was an oar there, and I grabbed the oar and I chopped all the way over to where he went through the ice.
Yeah. Soon, Fargo firefighters are there. The search is on. Below the ice, below the water, is an 11-year-old boy, Alvaro Garza, Jr. he is called. There's no dive team to call, no time to waste.
Our immediate thoughts, I think all of us, were the urgency that was there. The boy had just gone under the ice, and we knew we had to get him out as quick as we could.
Rescuers break ice with oars and pike poles. Poles break and are replaced as boats work outward from the spot young Garza fell in. No tricks here, just poling through the ice, into the dark water, and along the bottom. It's tough going.
I never thought we'd bring him back to life. There was no doubt in my mind that the divers would be out there. It'd be an all-night deal with lights, and I was convinced that he died.
To some, it does seem hopeless, but firefighters have heard of cold water rescues and accidental hypothermia. They believe there is a chance.
We still got time, I kept thinking, and we still have time. I told Darrell, we got time. Because I have read and heard that you can live in the ice if it's cold enough and you're young enough for 30 minutes.
Ambulances are stationed on both sides of the river. Paramedics are planning their part in this team rescue effort.
As soon as we got there, we set up the back of the ambulance. We took all the equipment we figured we're going to need. We laid out our ET tubes. We didn't know exactly what size the child was, so we had to kind of just sort of guess by age and what we could get for information from the scene. I think a lot of the pre-planning helped.
And at St. Luke's Hospital in Fargo, a whole staff assembles in hopes they can help save a life.
We were very fortunate from the institution to be able to know that the child was down at about 5 minutes after we were gone down. So we knew we were going to probably be dealing with a hypothermic drowning, and we were going to be dealing with a cold child. Then we called the cardiovascular surgeon, who was going to have to put in the lines. We called the perfusionist to start getting the pump ready to go. We called the operating room. We reserved a room. We called in an operating crew. We called in the anesthesia. And so we had everybody go to their stations and be ready to go as soon as possible.
Alvaro Garza has been beneath the water for a full 45 minutes. Finally, firefighters find something on the river bottom.
I came across something that felt soft, felt different. There was something different about it, is all I can say. And I had a feeling it was him. I don't know what told me that, but I asked Harold and Officer Kennedy to hold the boat right there because I thought I had something. Twice I had the boy about halfway up to the surface. I didn't know it was the boy at the time. Twice I had him halfway up and I lost him. The third time I just lifted it slowly as I could to try and keep him on. And it turned out to be him.
I got something, Pete. Here. Here it is. Got it. Get us in. Move the ambulance by the way. Here, you're doing a good chance, boy. Get over there, boy. Okay, go. Good. Come on, Jim. Come on, Jim. Jim and everybody.
And Jim had a good grip on the child and was wearing a life jacket and stuff and just yelled at us as he was coming up a real steep bank of grab his turnout gear. So we just grabbed onto Jim and ushered him to the back of the ambulance. Once we had the child on the stretcher, we instantaneously started to do our evaluation of airway, breathing, circulation. Our airway, we suctioned. We had about 3 to 4 ounces of water in the back of the patient's airway, intubated the patient with a size 6 ET tube, and because the patient was so cold and wet, we couldn't get any tape to stick to the patient, either on his face or all the way around his head. So basically, I just bagged the patient in with 100% oxygen and held my tube placement right. Dave Herzog here listened to lung sounds for me and checked over the stomach. We had great bilateral breath sounds, nothing into the stomach area. One of the paramedic students that was riding with us the day then checked for a carotid pulse and started compression since we had no carotid pulse. And we did a quick look with our monitor, which was asystole, and we then stripped the child real fast of his wet clothes, dried him off, and covered him with a light blanket over his lower torso just to keep him from being exposed and transported.
Thanks to firefighters, police, and paramedics, Junior Garza is now 1.5 minutes from the hospital. There are still no life signs. He is still clinically dead. At the hospital, CPR was tried, but doctors decided to go directly to the operating room to perform a bypass.
Basically, with the heart-lung machine, we pump the blood around his circulatory status. We put oxygen in it. We know that it circulates. We know that it's getting around. We know how much oxygen we're getting in there. And we can control the warming, and we can test blood gases, and we can test electrolytes, and we can keep a very, very tight control of what's going on. Whereas if we're peripherally warming or using the other techniques and closed chest massage, we're just hoping that things are happening, and we cannot measure, and so there's a degree of certainty difference.
While doctors worked, rescuers held out little hope. Did you think he was alive when you looked at him?
Oh, he didn't look like he was, he wasn't breathing or anything like that, and there wasn't any life signs. So, it was apparent that he was dead at the time that he was pulled up.
When you saw him, though, did he look alive to you?
No.
Yeah.
No. I was convinced he was dead, and I guess technically he was.
But there is hope. Junior Garza starts to come around. What's at work here is something called the dive reflex, the same reflex that allows mammals like whales and seals to stay underwater for prolonged periods of time. General knowledge of the dive reflex began to spread after 4-year-old Jimmy Tuntelovich was pulled from Lake Michigan after being submerged for 20 minutes. His case received national attention. As Jimmy recovered, old myths like after 4 minutes underwater there is irreversible brain damage, and after 6 minutes the victim is dead, those myths began to dissolve. Sudden submersion into cold water triggers a reduction of the metabolic rate, slowing the heartbeat. Blood is directed away from the body's extremities to interior vital organs, while oxygen in the blood still protects the heart, lungs, and brain. Victims are hypothermic or cold, discolored. They look dead, and because no vital signs are detected, they are presumed clinically dead. David Smith is a retired Coast Guard commander who has spent years studying cold water near drownings and accidental hypothermia.
You go through something called a torso reflex, where you automatically inhale. Now, in many drownings, the person hits the water head first, inhales, and sucks a copious amount of water into their lungs. The water actually goes into the lungs. Now, the heart is beating very rapidly, and what it does, if it's fresh water, it very rapidly goes through the lungs into the bloodstream. And the effect is that it cools the blood. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have this dive reflex. Sudden change pressure, temperature, metabolism slows, need for oxygen slows, and blood is shunted from the periphery to the interior of the body. So you have an overloading of cooled, oxygenated blood, which will be used at a much slower rate. The third thing, of course, is hypothermia, reduction of body temperature.
Okay, now it hurts. Tell me.
In Fargo, despite severe lung damage, Junior Garza is not only recovering quickly, but is asking for food.
Jim's got food here. Oh, yeah.
To all involved, it is a wonderful sight.
Just to see the response, the initial response was, boy, after we do all this, I hope he's not brain dead.
Yeah.
and then have enough to say, well, he's not brain dead, so at least we have justification for continuing our medical efforts. And then have him open his eyes and look around and become startled was just an unreal experience.
Pretty happy about it. We really were. Felt kind of nice to be a firefighter, that we did something worthwhile. Felt nice.
To fire departments, it means training paid off.
And if we didn't have good training, they wouldn't have known this. They would. If we were just 10 years ago, we would probably put them on the bank, threw a cover over and called the coroner.
Yeah.
And so this has been super. And I feel that the training is the most important thing that fire service or any emergency service can have.
And now there will be a move to install a dive rescue team.
We would hope in the future, at least we're looking into with Moorhead, in the possibility of certifying some divers. We have scuba divers on both departments and so forth, but they have to be certified rescue. And we're going to look into that and see what the funding would have to be necessary and how we would keep them certified and so forth. And it's something that we're going to look into and are busy looking into now.
To paramedics, it means clear thinking and preparation paid off.
I wouldn't change success. We had, everything went fine for us.
To the hospital, it means the regional trauma program has paid off.
Do this job here first. Okay. Okay.
To the Garzas, it means a little boy will have a chance to be a man. Their payoff, Junior comes home for Christmas, just 3 weeks after being pulled from beneath the icy Red River.
I would like to thank everybody who prayed for me and helped me. I can't wait to get home and back to school. Merry Christmas, everybody.
He leaves with some nerve damage, which may be corrected through therapy. Lesson learned, in these cases, there is hope.
The number of people who know about this, the medical people, the rescue people who know about this is growing. But in a number of areas, the word is really still not there.
So in other words, as a rescuer, the job would be also to spread that word.
Exactly. Everyone in the rescue chain, from the first responder to the physician who gives definitive final care to the patient, has got to know what the steps are and the tremendous potential for bringing people back to life who apparently are dead.
And one more thing, says David Smith, water doesn't have to be that cold to affect a rescue, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve children.
The oldest case I know of was a 72-year-old man who was underwater for 20 minutes. There's one case in the literature of a 40-year-old woman who was underwater for 40 minutes. She was taken to a clinical setting and she was breathing on her own, believe it or not, 5 minutes after she got to the hospital. So again, there are many, many factors involved, and the big word to potential rescuers is don't take anything for granted. Try your best to initiate CPR, transport, stabilize as quickly as you can. But again, another big word is think ahead, be prepared to deal with this, and the whole rescue team, right from the first responder all the way to the clinical, the physician, has got to be ready in advance to deal with these cases.
Smith also believes vehicle accident victims may be revived. They too are hypothermic, he says, and some accident victims may be needlessly dying.
There's more of an awareness now, a growing awareness that this suspended animation that we can now plainly see occurring in the water may happen in situations far removed from the water. Again, dive reflex, sudden change, pressure, temperature, blow to the head, blow to the back, blow to the neck, in the auto accident, hitting the steering wheel, hitting the windshield, may induce this sudden drop in temperature, may induce this sudden change in metabolic rate. The person may look like they're dead. There's a good chance they aren't. There are more and more people now being revived en route to the morgue who wake up spontaneously. It's evidently it's part of the same phenomena. Much more study needs to be done.
To repeat, temperature lies at the heart of this matter. People who study accidental hypothermia say people are not dead when they are cold and dead. They are only dead when they are warm and dead.
The segment begins near Buckner, Missouri, a rural community near Kansas City, devastated by